All right, it is 10 o'clock, and welcome to Life at the Sci-Fair Library. We are virtual, obviously. Um, that being the case, do be prepared. This is a session about cozy mysteries, and my cats love those, so naturally, they're going to probably join us. Life is a program where we talk about sort of a potpourri of different topics and interests. I'm Rachel Hugenberg. I'm one of the librarians here. I'm the current hostess. And this morning, I am incredibly excited because I love a good cozy mystery, especially the cat theme ones, not gonna lie. And we are joined this morning by cozy mystery expert John McDougall of the Murder by the Book Bookshop. In past job incarnations, John has sold model toys and trains. He's been a barista, he's been a manager of a bookstore, and then he came into working for Houston's local mystery bookshop, Murder by the Book. And when his nose isn't in a book, he loves going to concerts, seeing musicals, going to Las Vegas, and spending afternoons in Herman Park. So next week, we are going to be joined by librarian Jen Krause, who is going to do some holiday caroling with us, and hopefully we can figure out how to sing along on video screen, and we'll see just what that sounds like. But today, we're going to be focusing on cozy mysteries, and I'm so very excited that you're with us. John, if you would take it away.
Sure. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for inviting me to be here. So a little bit of my background, like Rachel mentioned, before I was at Murder by the Book, I worked at several of the border stores here in the Houston area. I started at the Kirby store. I got to help open up the Galleria store, and then before I left Borders, I was general manager of the store down in Stafford. And it started going to a lot of book events at Murder by the Book and getting to meet the staff there. And so finally one day they were like, "Hey, if you ever want to leave Borders, give us a call." And I was like, "I have to get my store through inventory this week, but as soon as that's done, let's chat." So within a week, I was hired at Murder by the Book. Within 6 months, unfortunately, Borders had filed for bankruptcy and was gone. So it was really good timing on my part. So I have been at Murder by the Book. I just celebrated my 10th anniversary at the store in May this year, which is kind of crazy to believe. So I am, in addition to being the bookseller at the store and kind of the cozy guru, I'm also the event coordinator. So I get to set up all of our virtual stuff that we do. And if you guys are cozy mystery fans, I wanted to put in a plug. If you check out the store's YouTube channel, one of the cool things about the pandemic is because we've been doing so much stuff virtually, we've been able to feature cozy mysteries in a bigger way than we had been able to, at least author-wise at the store. You know, since a lot of the books come out as paperbacks, it's kind of hard to find publishing budgets to do tours for them. So we've been able to do a lot more virtual stuff. And we've done a couple of big panel things that we'll be uploading to the channel soon. So if you're definitely curious about cozy mysteries or just mysteries in general, definitely check out the store's YouTube channel because we have over 100 author events on there that we've just done throughout the pandemic. So, to get us jumped into cozies, if you are not familiar with the genre, so it's a subgenre of mysteries in general, kind of has its roots in the classic Golden Age mysteries, which of course would be kind of the mysteries that were written in the 20s and 30s by people like Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, Josephine Tey. So there's definitely a through line through those. You know, the Agatha Christie's, while she could kind of deal with some dark character motivations, there weren't really any like excessive gore or anything like that in those. So that's really kind of what is at the heart of cozy mysteries. They are mysteries where they usually take place in a small town, not always, but for the most part. The main character is usually a woman. There are a few that have men as main characters, but for the most part, the genre is mostly female sleuths, usually amateur sleuths who happen to stumble across a body. There's no graphic violence. There's no graphic language. Anything that happens to a murder victim is generally happens offstage and isn't described in any kind of detail. Usually the books feature kind of our heroine stumbling across a body. So they're kind of the perfect pandemic read. We've really found since March, people have really been turning to kind of classic golden age mysteries like Agatha Christie. I think we've sold through every Agatha Christie book on the shelf 2 or 3 times over because people just kind of want those nice kind of comforting reads where they know that it's going to be caught, the world's going to be righted when it's done. I think one of the things that cozy mysteries do a little bit better than, no, I don't want to say better, I would say differently than kind of a lot of the classic Golden Age stuff, is there's a lot more character development in them. You know, if you pick up the first Poirot or the first Marple book, or you pick up the 15th Marple or Poirot book, you kind of know the character is going to be the same, and there's not kind of a big story arc through those. Cozy mysteries, because they're set in small towns, one of the kind of tropes of the genre is our main character is usually has just recently moved back to her town, whether it's because she lived in a big town and was just fired. A lot of times she's either gone through a divorce or a breakup. There's usually something that brings her back to her hometown. Sometimes it could be a parent being sick or something like that. So they have ventured back to their small towns, and you kind of really get to know not only the main character, but you also get to know kind of all of the people of the town. And a lot of cozies, there's generally what they call a hook. So that would be, you know, maybe they're set at a bookstore or a candy shop, or maybe they revolve around a knitting circle. So there's usually some kind of community event or community gathering place where you get to know like the people that run the shops down the street, or the mail person, or the character's best friend. So there's always this really great sense of community, and there's usually some kind of character arc throughout the series of books where you get to see that main character kind of almost like I've been calling them lately kind of as a shorthand, kind of almost like a Hallmark movie where you get to see that person, you know, maybe they don't want to come back to their small town, but they get there and they fall in love with it and they kind of rediscover themselves. So that's always usually a great through line through them. One of the first cozies that kind of really helped, I think, maybe get the genre going, especially as far as like the culinary mystery hooks, was I completely just blanked on her name. Diane Mott Davidson, who does the Goldie books. Her character is a caterer, so each one of the books kind of deals with her dealing with some um, catering job, which kind of gives her an in to be able to explore different murders. And she kind of really, I think, kind of helped blow open the genre. She was one of the first, definitely, that included recipes in the back of the book, which is also a really fun thing about cozies. There's always, you know, great recipes. Some of them have knitting patterns. Erlene Fowler is kind of one of the early ones as well. She would have like knitting and quilting patterns in a lot of her books. So it's really interesting to get to chat with cozy authors to see how they go about finding kind of one, their hook, and then two, kind of all of that extra content that they're going to put in the back of the books. A lot of times it's kind of a mix of where the hooks come from. Some people will just have an idea and say, hey, I want to write a book in a bookshop at this small town. But I've also, as I've been talking to a lot of authors lately, a lot of times an editor will come to them and say, hey, our um, our line is missing. I think Darrell Wood Gerber, under the name Avery Ames, wrote a series of cheese shop mysteries. So her editor came to her and said, "Hey, we would love to have a series of mysteries that are set in a cheese shop. Could you write that?" And she said, "Oh yeah, let me do some research and figure it out." So it's interesting to see a lot of times how it's not necessarily an author that will kind of create the idea for the series, but an editor will say, hey, this is kind of what we want to do. Can you run with it? Earlier this week, I talked with Darcy Wilde, who writes historic cozies. Before that, she wrote a series of two books under the name Sarah Zettel that were vampire chef mysteries. So they're unfortunately, I don't think they're in print anymore, but they were so much fun because the main character was human and a chef, but her brother was a vampire and he owned a restaurant. So she had to come up with all of these recipes that had blood. It sounds way gorier than it is, but it was really, really clever. But she would have to find all of these recipes that somehow had some kind of blood in it so vampires could eat at this restaurant. They only did two books in the series, and it was kind of a weird, quirky little series, but I loved them. But she was telling me that basically an editor had pitched the idea to a friend of hers, and the friend was just too busy and said, hey, well, what do you think about Sarah writing this series? So she was able to write two of them. The downside to that sometimes is um, if the rights, if the publisher wants to end the series, it's hard to get the rights back to those. Like in Sarah's case, the company that had brought the idea to her the owner of that company had died, and then when the company itself got sold to somebody else, like nobody knew who owned the rights to those characters anymore, so she wasn't able to write those. I think the same thing happened to Julie Heisey, if any of you guys are familiar with the White House chef mysteries. I think she wrote like 8 or 10 of them. So that was sort of a contract for hire thing, and there were some disputes about royalties, so they didn't give her the rights to write anymore, and we're going to hire somebody else. Which unfortunately never came to fruition. So that series ended. So it's always frustrating when that happens too. But like I was saying, one of the things that I really love about cozies is kind of the character development, getting to meet that entire cast of characters. Of course, when you pick one up, there's always that little bit of you kind of have to disconnect yourself from reality just because, they definitely have a little bit of root in kind of Murder, She Wrote, and you kind of get that Cabot Cove syndrome of, if there are only a couple thousand people who live in this little town or this little city, how can there be a different murder like every 6 months and nobody realizes that there's something wrong here? So there's a little bit of that, what's it called? Not plausible deniability, but essentially, but just basically being able to kind of let go of that sense of kind of reality and just say, you know what, there's going to be a murder in this charming little town. And despite the fact that there is like 4 murders a year in this charming little town, it's still a little charming place that you really want to visit. Like I mentioned, Diane Mott Davidson was one of the early people that did it. I think in the 80s, there were a lot of books that they published where the main character was a woman and she was solving mysteries. She wasn't exactly she wasn't a private investigator. She wasn't a police officer. She was just kind of an amateur sleuth. And I think that they weren't really sure how to market those books. So a lot of them, I think they just kind of put kind of cartoony covers on them and said, okay, these are going to be cozy mysteries. One of them is, here with me, the Lucy Stone series by Leigh Meyer. I just discovered these this year. There's like 20 in the series, and I think I've read like 10 of them probably since August. I've just been inhaling them. So her character, Lucy, is a stay-at-home mom. As the series starts, I think she has 2 kids and then has another one pretty quickly. She lives in this small town called, it's not Miller's Cove, it's Tinker's Cove in Maine. And she really deals with a lot of stuff like, since it's in Maine, there's the lobster trade in town, but now there are all kinds of new environmental regulations. So it's impacting the lobster trade, which also brings in drugs into town. So there's some stuff that you would find. Each series is named after a holiday, but as you pick them up, you realize kind of the holiday part of it. It's just a good frame for kind of time period for the series. And like I said, she kind of digs into some really great real life issues while the books aren't necessarily graphic. Although I was really surprised. The first one was written like maybe early 90s. And in the first, she breaks a cardinal rule in cozy mysteries where the main character comes home and she finds the family cat dead in the front yard, which is like the number one no-no. Like mysteries in general, you don't kill the animal, the dog, the cat, they always live. So she comes home and she finds the family cat dead in the yard, and then a couple of chapters later you realize that somebody has actually killed the family pet. So I don't recommend that people start with the first book in that series. When I actually finished it, I just kind of sat there in shock. I was like, I can't believe that this happened. So I actually emailed our sales rep from the publisher because they had recently repackaged that book and a later one in a series with this cartoon rain on the cover. And they were like, oh, this is a really great place to jump in. And so I emailed our sales rep and was like, this book came out like 30 years ago. Did nobody go back through and do a quick edit before you guys just republished it? Because you could have easily removed that like cat murder out. I mean, it all happens off screen, but I was like, you could have removed that. It would not have impacted the story at all for that to be gone. And like, I can't sell people the first book in the series because if you give a cozy reader a book where the cat is murdered, like they would never trust anything I told them ever again. So I thought that the sales rep was going to be like, oh my God, this guy is crazy. Like, but instead she actually bubbled up like the note to higher ups in the publishing thing. And they were like, Yeah, you're right. If we are going to republish these older things, maybe we do need to do one more quick read through just to make sure that like we're packaging it properly. So I recommend if people want to jump in with the series, you can pretty much pick up any of them. But Tis the Season Murder, which we actually have in stock now, has two as a New Year's and a Christmas book in the series. I actually have a link to, I'm going to in the chat, a lot of the books that I have here to recommend for you. Um, I have popped onto a page on the Murder by the Book website, so that way um, they're easily accessible if you want to see. I'm going to drop. Actually, it won't let me post a link. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so there is a link that has a lot of those in it. But yeah, so like I said, she broke kind of a cardinal rule there. But the series had gotten started in the 80s, and I think it was one of those situations where, as kind of cozy mysteries caught on, the publishers weren't really sure how to market it. They also did the same thing with, if any of y'all are familiar with Mary Kay Andrews, who writes really fantastic summer beach reads. She's one of my absolute favorites. She actually got her start writing mysteries under the name Kathy Hogan Trochak. And they've gone back now and republished all of those books under the name Mary Kay Andrews. But she wrote 8 books in the Callahan Garrity series are really fantastic. They're set in Atlanta in the 90s, and kind of like the Lucy Stone books, she kind of tackles issues of the main character is a house cleaner and former police detective who kind of works as a PI on the side. But she also really tackled issues like race in Atlanta, but in a not necessarily a cozy way, but not like kind of a dark, grim way. There's lots of humor in the books. And I think with her also, it was one of those situations where the publishers weren't really sure how to market kind of lighter mysteries that weren't necessarily cozy mysteries. So they just kind of slapped really, really cozy covers on them. So if some cozy readers pick them up, they might think, oh, this is just a PI novel. It's not necessarily what I want. And like PI fans would pick it up and be like, I'm not going to read this book that's this yellow book with a big pink purse on the cover of it. So it's been really interesting to see kind of over the last kind of 20 years how cozy's like just even the marketing has been changed. I have a selection of kind of more recent favorites that we're big fans of at the store. One that sort of straddles the line of kind of cozy and thriller is Paige Shelton. She just started this new series. The first one's called Thin Ice. It just came out in paperback. The main character is a writer who has been stalked by a fan and put in the hospital and now lives in Alaska. She wants to get off the grid. She's kind of hiding out, living under a pseudonym and working for the local newspaper in Alaska. And what Paige has done really well in this series is she kind of created a thriller that her cozy readers would still enjoy, but that thriller readers would enjoy too. I'm actually going to be chatting with her later tonight on the Stories YouTube page about the second book in the series. So there's a little bit more tension and than you would find in a cozy, but there's also still nothing kind of super heavy or super graphic in it. But she has a really fantastic cozy series that I love that is called, it's the Cracked Spine series. This is the first one in the series. The main character is a young woman who lives in Kansas, and as the book opens, she decides that she wants a change. So she just answers this one ad to work at a bookstore in Scotland. She gets the job, she gets there, and she realizes that the owner of the bookstore also has this, they call it kind of the vault, this room where he keeps all of these antiquities that have kind of dubious provenance. And so he kind of hires her to, in addition to help out in the bookstore, also kind of help sell some of these antiquities. But what's really fun about the series too is she can sort of hear books whisper to her. So as she's walking through the bookstore, just like quotes from the books will pop in her head. And as she's, trying to solve the mystery and she's kind of thinking, like a quote from a book will pop into her head and it kind of helps point her in the right direction. So I think there are 6 books in that series right now. So it's always fun to see kind of which quotes and stuff she pulled. I also really like that series because they're set in Scotland. One of the things that you don't tend to see a lot in mysteries is books that are set kind of outside of the US. I don't know why, just for a long time that's kind of had been the standard that if it was a cozy mystery, it was going to be a small town here in the States. But people like Paige Shelton, hers are set, like I said, in Scotland. This other one, Marty Wingate, this one they're set in the UK. This one's The Bodies in the Library. The hook for this series is the main character has just gotten a job at a private library that caters specifically to mystery books. But as she gets hired, the the library was started by this woman who absolutely loved mysteries. So she collected all these rare first editions. She would invite people to come in for discussions about mysteries. So the main character, Haley, gets hired, but it turns out she actually doesn't know anything about mysteries at all. So she's trying to learn about the genre itself. So the first one, The Bodies in the Library, the title is a riff on Agatha Christie's The Bodies in the Library. The second one just came out called Murder Must Die, which is a spoof on Dorothy Sayers. So she takes each one and there's some kind of classic golden age mystery rare edition that's kind of at the heart of it. I kind of loved that one because when I started at Murder by the Book, I read some mysteries, but not a whole lot. So I wasn't kind of well versed in the genre as well as I could be. I had kind of known enough that McKenna and David, the owner and former event manager, were like, oh, you'll pick it up in no time. But like when I'd started at the store 10 years ago, I had never read an Agatha Christie book, which is kind of crazy. And of course, now I've read lots of them. And what I love about Christie is when you go back and read her, you can kind of see where kind of pretty much everybody since has been kind of influenced by her. We had a customer and at one point and made some comment about, I don't like Agatha Christie because the books are too formulaic. And like everybody at the store just kind of their eyes got wide and stared at her. And we were like, that's because she wrote the formula. Like she is the formula. That's where this came from. So these Marty Wingate ones, they're just super fun because you also learn a lot about kind of classic Golden Age mystery. Going along with kind of the UK theme, this one is a new author. This is their first book that just came out. It's called Death at a Country Mansion by Louise Innes. So as the book opens, the main character works at a hair salon in London. Her best friend is the daughter of a very famous opera singer, and the opera singer has been murdered. So our hairdresser has decided that she's going to help her best friend solve this mystery. It kind of has this classic moment where the classic golden age mystery moment where kind of they get all of the suspects together in one room and they're like, okay, we're going to go person by person and figure out who has motive, who did this. But like the humor in it's really fun. The opera singer was married 4 times. So of course they get all 4 of the exes back together. I think Louise Innes had also written some kind of light comedic romances before she did this series. But so that one's also set in the UK. If you want something that's a little bit more local, Murder Once Removed by S.C. Perkins. Stephanie Perkins is actually a very regular customer at Murder by the Book. She has years. The fun things was like when she came in and told us that she was writing a book, and then we got to see she won. The publisher Minotaur has a First Mystery Award every year where they award you get a publishing deal for your debut novel. And so we were so excited for her when she won. So the first book, Murder Once Removed, is actually set in Austin. It is a genealogy mystery. The main character, Lucy Lancaster, is a genealogist, and she is looking into the family history of a wealthy Texan who thinks that there was one of his ancestors was murdered. So as she's digging into the crime, she realizes that yes, this ancestor was murdered, but it also has ties to a contemporary murder. So she's actually trying to solve 2 crimes, one that happened 500 years ago and one that has just happened pretty recently. They're set in Austin. Like any good, I think, Texas mystery should have, Lucy spends a lot of time at a local Texas restaurant. So by the time you're finished with the book, you definitely want a margarita and some chips and salsa. Her second one just came out, and the third one will be out early next year. And I think she's supposed to be dropping by the store sometime in the next couple of weeks to sign some stock for us. So it's been really fun to get to host her launch event when the first one came out and to kind of watch her publishing journey. And what else do I have? This is a new one that just came out this year. I will say, on one of the kind of not unfortunate, but one of the things about the cozy mystery genre as a whole is it's not very diverse. it tends to be a lot of white characters and almost completely white towns. There's not a lot of diversity. That's definitely changing as people are kind of more aware of that. So one of my favorites this year is Inside Scoop, which is an ice cream parlor mystery by Abby Collette. It is set in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, which is a small town just outside of Cleveland. The main character has just moved back to help her family reinvent their ice cream shop, but is trying to open it up in the dead of winter in the middle of a blizzard. I just found out a couple of days ago when we were chatting with Ellie Alexander about her upcoming. Apparently, counter to what you would think, ice cream is actually super popular during the winter. I guess maybe it's, people are longing for warmer temperatures and summer when we're all freezing. So this one, it's really great because there's this whole family unit where Bronwyn comes back. She is trying to reconnect with the memory of her grandmother by using her grandmother's recipe. So as the book opens, she is trying to make her grandmother's recipe for ice cream made from snow. So she ventures outside to get snow and realizes, she can't use any of the snow that's on the street. The best place to get kind of pristine, untouched snow is going to be down by the river. So she tries to go down by the river. She slips, falls down a snowbank, and basically slides right across a dead body and has to solve the crime. It's really clever. I like the fact that she uses several generations of the family. So her grandfather, her parents, her cousins. So it's there's a great big cast for it. And the second one of those will be out later next year. Also another one that's kind of in Ohio. This is my favorite. I call it kind of gateway cozy for people. If people aren't sure about the genre, they're not sure where they want to start. My coworker, Rebecca, loves Don McDermott, Ian Rankin, kind of the darker British mystery, the better for her. She loves kind of the blood and guts. She just really loves dark stuff. So I gave her Dumpling by Vivian Chen, which is the first in the Noodle House mysteries. She absolutely loved it. She is now a converted cozy reader. There are 6 books in this series. This is the first one, Death by Dumpling. The main character, Leigh, has, as always happens, has just suffered a breakup, and so she has moved back to her hometown of Cleveland to work at her parents' Chinese restaurant. What's interesting about this series is because they're set in Cleveland, you don't get that small town feel from the town. The family's restaurant, the Noodle House, is set in a strip center called Asia Village. So there's an Asian gift store, there's a karaoke bar, there's a donut shop, there's a kind of Asian souvenir shop. And she uses the strip center where the restaurant is as sort of the small town gossip mill. Which is genius. Murder by the Book is in a small strip center, and there's always gossip. The guys from the coffee shop will come over and be like, "Hey, did you hear about this that happened or this?" So I thought it was really fun for her to use kind of that as the kind of to get the small town feel of it. What I love about the series is her best friend, Alana's best friend, works at a bar, and it's her roommate as well. And her best friend is always egging her on to help solve mysteries. And early in the series, she talks about how much she loves Nancy Drew. So she goes out and buys herself a Nancy Drew notebook and a Private Investigators for Dummies book. And because she's going to be an amateur PI and she's going to solve these mysteries. In the first one, she has to take lunch to the guy that owns the strip center. And after she delivers it, he drops dead. And it's quickly learned that he had a shrimp allergy and the food that she has delivered has killed him. So now not only is she a murder suspect, but so is pretty much everybody that works at her family's Chinese restaurant. So she's trying to clear not only her name, but the name of her family and their reputation. The titles for these are hilarious. So the first one's Death by Dumpling. The second one is Wonton Terror, Murder Lo Mein. My favorite is Dim Sum of All Fears. The most recent one is Egg Drop Dead. So one of the things you'll notice kind of as a hallmark of the cozy mysteries is a lot of them have kind of sometimes really funny, sometimes really cringe-worthy pun titles. I joke that all of these publicists and editors must just have these massive spreadsheets of puns. And when it's time to name a new book, they just kind of pull up their spreadsheet. A lot of authors we chatted with Donna Andrews pretty recently. She says all of her books are bird themes. So every pun has to have some kind of bird title. Her favorite has been Gone Gull, which came out right around the same time Gone Girl did. So the timing for that was perfect. But they say a lot of times if they can't figure out a good pun title, they will crowdsource it to their Facebook pages and ask family, friends, and stuff like that. And for Donna, if you're the person that comes up with the pun that she uses, she'll put you in the book either as a character or give you a quick mention in the acknowledgments, which is always fun. One of my favorite subgenres of cozy mysteries, there's the culinary ones, there's the ones set in bookstores. As Rachel mentioned, she's a big fan of the cat ones. So, of course, the classics are Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown. There's Lillian Jackson Braun. She was kind of, probably one of the kind of giants of the genre. She wrote the Cat Who books, and gosh, I think there were like 30 or 40 of them. Also, kind of Murder by the Book history. If you guys are familiar with the store, our former store manager, Dean James, who worked at the store for 30 years, who now lives in Mississippi, actually writes cozy mysteries under the name Miranda James. And his character is Charlie Diesel. So he's one of the few that actually has a male character in the series. So his character is Charlie Harris, who is a librarian at a library in Mississippi and has a Maine Coon named Diesel who follows him around. It's a really fun series. There's a lot of kind of mystery in jokes because the cat's named Diesel after Elizabeth Peters, who wrote the Amelia Peabody mysteries, which are, I guess you could consider them cozy. They're historical. The main character is an archaeologist in Victorian England who ends up going to Egypt. But she actually had a real Maine Coon cat named Diesel. So the cat in the books is named Diesel as an homage to her. Is kind of an homage to Charlaine Harris, who does the Sookie Stackhouse True Blood books, who is also a big friend of the store. So Dean is, also well-versed in cozies as he writes them himself. So if you haven't checked out the Cat in the Stacks books, those are super fun. Another subgenre, and one of my favorites, is paranormal cozies. I kind of mentioned the Vampire Chef ones. Victoria Laurie, who used to be a Texan author who now lives in Michigan, I think, did a really great series, has two series, one with a ghost hunter and one with a psychic private eye. But one of my favorites this year, it's the start to a new series, is called Haunted Homicide by Lucy Ness. The main character is Avery Morgan. She has just gotten a job at the Portage Path Women's Club. She got the job because the board really liked her, but the president of the board wanted her granddaughter to get the job instead. So there's lots of friction between her and the board president. And when Avery goes downstairs to the basement one night to check something out, she stumbles across the body of the president, who was this terrible woman that everybody hated. It's one of those situations where pretty much everybody had motive to kill her. And while Avery is down in the basement, she sees another woman out of the corner of her eye and quickly realizes that the Portage Path Women's Club is haunted by the ghost of a woman named Clemmy. Her name is Clemmy, and she's been haunting the Portage Path Women's Club since the 20s when the basement was a speakeasy. So it's so much fun. One of the things that I really like about this series, it's always tricky when you have kind of a ghost as a character, because what's to keep the author from saying like, oh, the ghost can see, hear everything. They can easily just give you clues. But Clemmy can't come out of the basement, so she doesn't actually see everything that happens in the house. So she can offer a little bit of insight, but she just can't pop up and say, hey, I saw this person do it. Done. End of mystery. But because Clemmy is a ghost from the 20s, she's basically the ghost of a flapper, so she uses a lot of that fun 20s speakeasy lingo. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with the second book in the series that's going to come out in March. Another of my favorites is Let Chai by Bree Baker. I also just love that title, Live and Let Chai. Again, that's kind of a clever pun. This series is set in a small town of North Carolina. It is called Charm. North Carolina. This series has a really fun, kind of almost practical magic vibe to it. There's nothing paranormal that happens in the books, but the main character has moved back to town because she wants to open up a sweet tea shop on the beach. She has two elderly aunts that take care of her. They're beekeepers. They've reminded me so much of the two aunts from Practical Magic, if you've read that book or seen the movie. And there are rumors that any woman that falls in love, or any man that falls in love with a woman in this family, is doomed to die an early death. So there are all of these kind of weird coincidences that happen in their family history. So that's where kind of, I think, kind of the Practical Magic vibe comes from. But it's a super sweet series. There's four of them so far, and I kind of blew through those early on in the pandemic too. They're one of my favorite discoveries for the year. Pretty recently, we got together with the publisher Kensington to do a cozy mystery road trip event where we paired up with Fountain Bookstore in Virginia and Creating Conversation, which is out in Redondo Beach, California. And each store did a virtual event. One was at 11:30, ours was at 12:30, and then one was at 1:30. So it was sort of a road trip across the country. And each store got to pick their own theme and pick which authors they wanted involved. And the theme that I actually just emailed the publicist and said, hey, these are like a couple of books that I've loved recently. And she came up with a theme that they had all featured older women as the sleuths. So two of those that we talked about, the first one is Poppy Harmon Investigates by Leigh Hollis. So Leigh Hollis is actually a pseudonym for the author Rick Kopp, who was actually a writer on The Golden Girls for a while. And when he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do for his next series, his editor suggested, hey, you've always kind of wanted to play with the idea of Golden Girls. What if you did like essentially the Golden Girls solving mysteries? So the character Poppy Harmon was an actress in the 80s. She played on pretty much every detective TV show that was out there, but she's most known for playing the role of secretary to a PI on a very well-known show. And after her husband has died and she realizes he has squandered all of their money, she has to figure out what she's going to do with the next stage of her career. Acting jobs aren't really lining up for her, so she thinks, oh, if I played the secretary of a PI on TV, how hard could it be to be an actual PI? So she and three of her friends get together and they form the Desert Flowers Detective Agency. But because they are women in their 60s, nobody will really take them seriously. So they get her daughter's boyfriend, Matthew, to pretend to be the PI and brains behind the operation. So as people come into the office, they meet with him while Poppy kind of sits in the corner pretending to be the secretary and taking notes. And then she and her friends are actually the ones that go out and solve the mysteries. So Alice also has a couple of other series. These are my favorites, and also writes under a couple of other pseudonyms too. You'll quickly find as you dive into cozy mysteries, almost every cozy mystery writer has like 2 or 3 different pseudonyms that they write under. So anytime a new book comes out by a name that we don't recognize, usually one of the first things we do is flip to the copyright page to see who the copyright actually is, if it's the name that's on the cover or if it's a different author. And sometimes that could be because maybe they're moving to a different publisher and the different publisher wants to build a different brand for them. Sometimes it might be, in the case of Darcy Wilde, who I talked to the other night, she has her historical cozies, and then she has kind of the paranormal ones, and she didn't want the publisher thought it would make more sense to have them kind of be 2 specific different brands instead of just one. So it's interesting to see kind of who is who. It's always fun to realize when you pick up a new series that you love, it's actually written by an author that you've loved in the past and you just didn't realize it. And then the last one I have that was also part of our Sass Sleuths of a Certain Age panel is Jane Darrowfield, Professional Busybody. And this one, our main character, Jane Darrowfield, is also in her 60s, and she has made a name for herself helping friends out with random odd jobs. Like her best friend went to the hair salon, her regular hairdresser there, somebody else filled in, and she loved the substitute hairdresser so much she didn't know how to tell her real hairdresser, I don't want to be your client anymore. I want to go to this new person. So she hires Jane to kind of show up and have the conversation with the hairdresser. So she does a lot of kind of funny, odd jobs like that for people. And one of her friends recommends her to a nursing home where there's been some friction between residents. There are 2 groups of people. Or the people that kind of hang out in the TV room, and then there are people that like love to be out on the golf course. And there's a lot of friction between them. There are food fights in the cafeteria of the nursing home. There are so many just like hilarious scenes that would be perfect for TV in this one. So when the guy who is in control of the golf tee times, who's caused the most friction, ends up dead, they ask Jane to come in and pretend to be a resident at the nursing home to solve the mystery. Um, and of course, there's some romance in this one as she falls in love with one of the guys that's there, but lots of humor involved. I think that's kind of one of the things that I love. One of the many things I love about cozies, especially right now, is that there's always, like I said, a great sense of community. There's always a lot of heart to them. I don't think that they get enough respect for just the amount of heart that's in them, the relationships that they create between the characters. I think a lot of times people just kind of look at the covers and dismiss them as fluff. And yes, they are definitely fluff. They're fluff in the best way, but I think that there's a lot of meat and heart and humor to them. So those are the ones that I had to suggest as some recent friends or recent favorites. If you guys have any questions, I am happy to answer about those, the bookstore, kind of anything in general.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions for a little brief Q&A with John, and that way you can ask whatever you want. We do have some comments in the chat here about Murder by the Book has done a lot of wonderful programming and some very big excitement for Miranda James.
Awesome.
For people who are trying to branch out from the cat mysteries, I know that's kind of me. I've gotten stuck in the cat mystery rut, but still want to stay in the cozies. Where do you suggest we go?
If you want different animals, not necessarily cats, David Rosenfeld has a great series. They're Andy Carpenter. They kind of border the line. They're not technically cozies because his character is a lawyer, so he's a little bit more of a professional solving mysteries. But his character is really involved with golden retriever rescue. And like last year's Christmas book was called Dachshund Through the Snow. This new one's called Silent Bite. So that's David Rosenfeld with his Andy Carpenter mysteries. Those are great. Weirdly, one of my favorite series, which I didn't grab as I left the store, is Ellie Alexander's Bake Shop Mysteries. The first is called Meet Your Baker, and it's one of the few cozy series that I've read where the main character actually doesn't have any kind of pet at all. And a lot of, even if they aren't kind of like the Miranda James books or the Rita Mae Brown ones, even if like the cat isn't necessarily a focus of the book, a lot of times the characters will still have some pet that they will mention or take care of. But the L.A. Alexander Bake Shop Mysteries, she doesn't have a pet at all. I think Ellie said maybe in a couple of books the character might get a cat. But they are set in the town of Ashland, Oregon, which is known for its Shakespeare Festival. And what I love is the main character is a pastry chef on a cruise ship who has now returned home to help her mom run their family bakery. And so there's lots of great recipes in the back of them. It's one of the only ones that I've actually tried recipes from. And they're not just pastry baked recipes. She has recipes for a really great chicken curry salad, a chicken tortilla soup, and Ellie Alexander has a really great YouTube channel where she makes a lot of these recipes as she tests them. But they also have a lot to do with theater because of the Shakespeare Festival being there too. So those are one of my favorites. If you want to branch out into a different kind of cat, there is a series by Sophie Kelly that's the Magical Cats series, where the cats can actually, like, one of them can walk through walls and one of them can actually like pick up clues and carry things around. So if you want a different branch of cat mysteries, there are some paranormal cat ones out there too. I like the cat ones, but everybody kind of has their own, like, this is what I read, this is what I don't read. I don't care for ones where the animals talk. If it's not Narnia, I don't want my pets talking to me in books. So I have read a couple of the Rita Mae Brown ones, but because the cats have kind of more dialogue than I care for, I kind of tend to stay away from those. But I love a good one like the Miranda James ones where, Diesel's kind of always there, kind of chirping away at their feet.
All right, Susan has asked from the British Library Crime Classics series, are there particular authors you recommend?
Oh, that's great. So if you guys are not familiar with the British Crime Classics series, so it started, gosh, it might have been like 3 or 4 years ago. The first, I would recommend if you haven't read Mystery in White by Farjan to definitely start there. It was the first one that they published. So the British Crime Library decided there were so many Golden Age mysteries that just weren't available anymore that they were going to start reprinting them. And they got this guy, Martin Edwards, who just kind of knows everything about crime classics to kind of help curate. So Mystery in White was the first one that they published. It was a Christmas mystery. It was the first reprint book to ever hit the bestseller list in the UK. It was a huge success over there. It's still our best-selling one in the series. So I would definitely start with there. But so basically, what they do is they've been reprinting a lot of the classic Golden Age stuff that's been just out of print for a long time. John Boode, I'm going to put this in because I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Bude. He is a big favorite. They also just started reprinting a lot of the ECR Lorac books. I'm gonna look one up real quick because I want to get the title right on it. It's a big favorite. Fire in the Thatch by ECR Lorac is also really great. Any of the Lorac ones are big favorites. Dean, who used to work at the store, that's one of his all-time favorite Golden Age mystery writers behind like Marjorie Allingham. There are also a lot of short story collections that they published with different themes. There's one for like resort murder or people who are going away on vacation. There's a couple of them that specifically revolve around the holidays. So if you're also not sure kind of where you want to start with the series, a lot of those really great classic Golden Age short story things have been compiled by Martin Edwards as part of the series. And he offers, each book has a kind of introduction where he talks about kind of why he picked that one and why are there ones to be read. So those are a couple that I would recommend starting with, but honestly, they're publishing such good stuff, you could probably jump in anywhere. And if you do happen to come into the store, we actually have a full bookcase over by your staff picks that's just an entire bookcase of just the British crime classics. We're so excited to see a lot of that stuff being republished. On the side to that, Otto Hensler, who owns the Mysterious Bookshop in New York, also has his own publishing company, and he started publishing Hensler Presents, which are American crime classics. So he's been publishing some people like Earl Stanley Gardner, Mary Roberts Reinhardt, who did some really great early Gothic stuff that hasn't been available for a long time. So we're starting to see a lot more of the American stuff being reprinted too, which has been nice in the last couple of years to see a lot of that stuff be available again and not just kind of disappear into obscurity. And I also want to say thank you so much for the comment about the programming. We've had a lot of fun with the virtual stuff. We were really lucky early on that a couple of publicists from publishers were really helpful getting us set up on Zoom and being able to stream things live on YouTube and Facebook. And it's been really fun to get to talk with authors that we wouldn't necessarily get to chat with because of geography. And like I mentioned, tour budgets. We've been able to do an event with Alexander McCall Smith. We were able to get Stephen King to interview James Lee Burke. John Grisham interviewed James Lee Burke. Those are all available on the store's YouTube channel. It's just stuff that pairings that we wouldn't have necessarily been able to do in store. So it's been really fun to be able to figure out what we could do virtually. And we're also really excited once we can actually do stuff in store again to still be able to do some virtual go along with that too, because we know not everybody can always get into the bookstore. So we're excited to see how we can kind of supplement what we do in store with the virtual stuff now that we have kind of the ability to do it. And I think starting last week, we figured out a way that all of our, unless it's a ticketed event, all of our virtual stuff will be streamed live on the store's Facebook page and our YouTube account at the same time. So that way it's available in both places.
That's awesome. For people who are just kind of, they've been in the cozy genre a while, are there any particular picks that you have that would be an enjoyable surprise, kind of something of a different flavor, still cozy, but, you know, a little out of the box?
Yeah, so definitely, like I mentioned, out of the ones I picked, like the Paige Shelton thriller series are so fun. There's a book that just came out by Richard Osmond called The Thursday Murder Club, which is not technically a cozy, but is definitely very cozy adjacent. Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osmond. It is about a group of four 60 or 70-year-olds who are in a nursing home. Every week they get together to discuss cold cases. And when a crime happens at the nursing home, they decide like this is their chance to actually get to solve a mystery, much to the chagrin of the detective who's assigned to the case, and they keep getting in his way. My coworker Brenda really loved that. If you like historical, if you haven't read Alan Bradley's Flavia Duluth series, they're absolutely wonderful. The main character is an 11-year-old. Oh, thanks, Susan. Yeah, Brenda loved Thursday Murder Club. The Flavia Duluth series, the main character Flavia is 11 years old. She is interested in chemistry and poison. She's always playing pranks on her sisters, like putting things in their lip gloss that will make their lips blow up. They're set in England in the 50s. And Flavia is a very precocious and kind of old for her age character. The first one's called The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. And it is like far and above the bookstore's all-time best-selling book. When it came out in hardcover, we sold over 1,000 of them in hardcover, and that hasn't happened with anything else. And I think we sold well over that in paperback. So that's also a really great pick. Sarah has a really great series that are set in the 20s. The first one is called Murder at Archlee Manor. Sarah's actually also a local author, and she has been self-publishing this new series. They're all set in the 20s. The main character is a young woman who is a poor relation to this very well-known family. And in the first book, her cousin's engaged to get married, and that the guy that the cousin's going to marry is kind of up to no good and asks her to do some research into this guy's background. And that sort of gives her in to solving mysteries. They're all set at these big palatial English estates in the 20s. And the main character kind of works as a fixer. But to do a lot of her research, Sarah read a lot of kind of classic Golden Age stuff like Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers, not to like get like specific period details, but to also just see kind of language time. And she really wanted them to harken back to those. So that's also a really great series. McKenna, the store owner, is a huge fan of the book, The Awkward Squad, which is this quirky French book. I'm going to put this in the chat too. It was one of her favorites last year by Sophie Hanaff. It is about a group, or the main character is a French police officer who has gotten in trouble for firing her weapon too many times, and she thinks that she is going to get fired. And instead of getting fired, she gets given basically a crew of other misfit detectives. One of them, who they call Officer Merlot, who drinks too much. One of them has crashed their police car times. One of them was a police officer, has written several best-selling mystery novels kind of along the lines of Castle, and has now decided that she wants to get back into police work so she can get more ideas for her stories. So there are all these misfit officers that nobody thinks are going to amount to anything. So they put them all together on this squad called the Awkward Squad and give them a bunch of cold cases that they need to solve. Really, because they think it's just going to keep everybody kind of out of their hair in a way, but they're all determined to prove their worth as officers and solve mysteries. So that's also a really fun one where, again, because they're actual professional crime solvers, it's not technically a cozy, but it's also kind of on the lighter and fun end. There's also, if anybody has read them, the Ruth Galloway series by Ellie Griffiths. Her main character is a forensic archaeologist dealing with bog bodies in the UK. And Ellie Griffiths has actually won the Dagger in the Library Award from the British crime writers, and it's only been given out like 4 or 5 times in the last however long the organization's been around, and they give it to writers for a whole body of work, not just one specific thing. So that's the Ruth Galloway series. They're also kind of really good, solid, traditional mysteries that don't necessarily have kind of an easy does, but also don't have kind of anything kind of really graphic or heavy in them either. I will say so every year we do a kind of book advent calendar at the store where we all pick we pick a general theme, and then we all pick books that we think will fit the theme. And then every day for Advent, we'll post a review, or this year we're doing video reviews for the books. And this year our theme was kind of escapist reads. So standalones, first in series, or later books in series that you just jump in that are going to be either comfort reads or the kind of book that you'll just sit down and want to inhale kind of in one fell swoop. So if you keep an eye on the store's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you'll be able to see a lot of those. I think we've got a really fun list this year. So those are a lot of kind of lighter ones. I'm not familiar with the Jefferson Tate books coming. I will definitely check those out when I get back in the store this afternoon. And we're always, if you're looking for kind of good light stuff, that's kind of what a lot of us have been reading too. So, you know, if there's something I'm not thinking of, if you just come in the store and say, "Hey, I just want something that's completely gonna like charm me," we also carry some non-mystery stuff too. So there's a few, it's like there's one called "The Tower, the Zoo, and the Tortoise" by Julia Stewart, which is not a mystery, but it's set in the UK, about a woman who works in the lost and found department in the tube stations. So she's always finding these kind of weird items, and it's about her and kind of the people that she interacts with. And it's just also a charming read. I think that is one of our upcoming Advent picks too. So we do have some non-mystery stuff that will also kind of get you through if you're looking for comfort reads, as well as, we have some cookbooks, we have lots of jigsaw puzzles, so we have lots of other kind of non-book stuff too.
So, do you have a personal favorite cozy read? This sort of like, the greatest cozy read that you feel like you've ever read?
Hmm. I don't know if it's available anymore, so I will try to think of something else that people can easily track down as well. But there is a book by, oh my gosh, it's been so long. What her first name is. Her last name is Kerwin, Kirwin, and the book is called Killer Librarian. And it's about this woman who is a librarian. She is supposed to be getting married, and her fiance dumps her, and she decides, screw it, I'm going to go on my honeymoon trip to England by myself anyway. She gets there, she stays at this bed and breakfast, and somebody drops dead at the bed and breakfast. So she is not running around killing people, just people seem to be dying all around her. And it's so funny, it's so clever. The author only did like 2 books in the series, and I wish that she would do more. Like I said, I don't know if it's still actively available, but it's definitely one to check out. I would say series wise, if I had an all-time favorite series, they're paranormal. It's the Ghost Hunter Mysteries by Victoria Laurie. Um, the first one is called "What's a Ghoul to Do?" And her character MJ is a ghost hunter. She can see ghosts around her. As the book opens, she works for real estate agents trying to help rid houses that they're trying to sell of ghosts. And as the series progresses, she and her best friend Gilly, who is terrified of ghosts and is always like running away shrieking, um, they end up getting their own hunting TV show. And there's so much humor in the books, but she also creates these really scary ghosts. And it's fun to see the way she balances kind of the scary ghost elements with just the humor in the series. And what she's done really well is she has created this entire world. So the Ghost Hunter Mysteries are a spin-off of her Abby Cooper Psychic Eye Mysteries, where that character is a professional psychic who, as the series progresses, ends up working with the FBI to help solve cases. So like both characters pop up in each other's books. And then she's also just started a third spin-off with Kat, the psychic sister, and this new series doesn't have anything paranormal in it. But it's just this really fun world where these characters have all kind of come together and created their own family. So I would say that's probably my all-time favorite series. But recently, I would say probably one of my favorite, just easily available cozy reads would definitely be Cracked Spine by Paige Shelton. Like just the Scotland setting, like I said, the character being able to hear whispers of books when she walks around them. Like I read the first one and just couldn't wait for more. And I'm always excited when there's another one of those coming out. My favorites, I think, besides the paranormal ones, my favorites, not shockingly, are the ones that revolve around bookstores and libraries.
I have to say, I'm going to be looking for Killer Librarian now
Yeah.
because I obviously, and Regina, who's another one of our librarians, is here. She says that she's also adding that to her list. So you've got several of us on the lookout for this rare cozy, if you
Yeah,
will.
it's definitely worth tracking down. It's so much fun. Oh, Mary Lou,
Ah,
there we go.
see, we have lots of expert cozy sleuths on today. Um, well, thank you so much for coming out and for joining us and for giving us a piece of, uh, I guess, book comfort food in
Yeah.
terms of life. We really appreciate it. And if you have anything else, guys, that you want to add, just pop it in the chat. We're getting some thank yous for the great recommendations. Happy reading and happy holidays.
Awesome.
Speaking of holidays, great recommendations. Thank you so much for a great program from Regina. I really appreciate you being here. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, it's
And
absolutely my pleasure. It's been really, the store was closed for the public for so much of this year that we didn't actually just get to talk. So my cats are now fighting behind my ring light. So we didn't actually just like get to talk to people about books for so long. We could help people over the phone, and we were doing lots of online orders and email stuff. And it wasn't like this, the fun part of the job about getting to talk to people about books and do this. So I'm anytime I get to chat about books with people, I'm so excited. So thank you so much for inviting me.
well, thank you so much for being willing to come out and to talk with us and give us a piece of cozy mystery life. And happy holidays. Next week, we are going to be having a holiday caroling sing along with librarian Jen Kraus. It's kind of a life tradition every year. So we would appreciate it if you all would join us again next week at 10 a.m. And with that, thank you so much, John. And
Thank you.
we really appreciate it.
Y'all take care. Thanks.